morning fog rolled through Austin, Texas, as 33-year-old Rachel Morrison sat on her balcony overlooking Lady Bird Lake, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. As a tech startup founder, she'd built a company from nothing to a multi-million-dollar valuation in just 5 years. She was disciplined, focused, relentlessly goal-oriented. But somewhere along the way, she'd applied that same goal-oriented approach to everything, including pleasure. And it had stopped working. Rachel couldn't remember the last time she'd touched her own body simply to feel, without a specific endpoint in mind. Sex, both partnered and solo, had become transactional, a race toward orgasm that, when achieved, felt hollow. When it didn't happen, it left only frustration and a sense of failure. She'd stopped being intimate with anyone 8 months ago, not because she disliked sex, but because it had become another source of performance anxiety rather than joy. Another thing to achieve rather than experience. Maybe I'm doing everything wrong, she thought, watching kayakers glide across the lake. But I don't know how to do it differently. The shift began during a conversation with her college friend Maya at a coffee shop on South Congress. "Rach, can I ask you something kind of personal?" Maya said, stirring her iced latte. Rachel nodded, curious. "Do you touch yourself?" Rachel felt her cheeks warm. "Sometimes. Why?" "No, I mean," Maya smiled gently. "Do you touch yourself without a goal? Without trying to get anywhere? Without aiming for orgasm? Just exploring, feeling?" Rachel went quiet. The truth was, she didn't. Every time she touched herself, it was with a clear objective: achieve orgasm as efficiently as possible and move on with her day. "I used to be the same way," Maya continued. "Treated my own body like another task to complete, until I started working with this sexologist here in Austin, Beto Alves. He taught me something that completely changed my relationship with my body and sexuality." "What?" Rachel asked, genuinely curious. "That pleasure isn't about destinations. It's about the journey. And when we stop chasing orgasms and simply start feeling, everything changes." 3 weeks later, Rachel found herself standing outside a converted bungalow in the Clarksville neighborhood, reading a copper plaque. Beto Alves, Integrative Sexology and Somatic Therapies. Sexologist Beto greeted her with a warm smile. At 35, he had a presence that was simultaneously calm and energetic, dressed simply in a navy Henley and dark jeans. His eyes conveyed a rare combination of professionalism and genuine compassion. "Rachel, welcome. I appreciate your courage in taking this step." The office was inviting. Sand-toned walls, lush plants, comfortable cushions in earth tones, the gentle sound of flowing water. Nothing clinical. Everything inviting openness. They sat in comfortable chairs facing each other, and Beto began with questions that surprised Rachel. Not directly about her sex life, but about her relationship with her own body. How did she feel looking at herself in the mirror? When was the last time she'd touched her own skin simply to feel the texture? Could she experience pleasure in non-sexual sensory experiences? Rachel realized, with a tightening in her chest, that the answers to all these questions were uncomfortable. She avoided looking at herself. She rarely touched her own body except out of necessity. She lived so much in her head that she barely noticed physical sensations. "You mentioned that sex has become empty," Beto said gently. "But what if the problem isn't sex itself, but how we relate to pleasure? When we transform pleasure into performance, into a goal to be achieved, it loses its essence." Rachel felt something resonate deeply. "So what's the solution?" "Relearn to feel without a goal," Beto answered. "Reconnect with your body in an exploratory, curious way, without an agenda. And it starts with very simple practices. The first, homework. Beto gave Rachel seemed absurdly simple. Spend 10 minutes a day touching any part of her body: arm, leg, face, just feeling. No sexual intention, no goal of getting anywhere, just sensory exploration. It sounds silly, Rachel said, skeptical. It does, Beto agreed with a smile. But it's revolutionary. Most of us have completely lost the ability to simply feel. Everything needs to have a purpose, a goal. Pleasure without an objective seems like a waste of time. Rachel tried that same night. Lying in bed after a shower, she began running her fingers along her arm. Immediately her mind raced. This is ridiculous. I should be working. What a waste of time. But she persisted. Slowly, she began to actually notice the texture of skin, the temperature, the variations in sensitivity across different areas. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When she stopped, something subtle but significant had shifted. She felt more present, more inside her own body. In subsequent sessions, Beto introduced conscious breathing practices. Not complicated technical breaths, but simply paying attention to the act of breathing, feeling the air entering, filling the lungs, being released. Breath is the bridge between mind and body, Beto explained. When we breathe consciously, we move out of our heads and into our bodies. Rachel began practicing throughout the day, pausing in the middle of work to breathe consciously for 2 minutes. The effect was surprising. She felt calmer, more centered, more present. In the 4th session, Beto suggested something that made Rachel hesitate. I want you to practice exploratory self-touch, he said calmly. But with one important rule: no intention of orgasm, no goal, just curious exploration of your own body, including erogenous zones, but without an agenda. What do you mean? Rachel asked, confused. Touch yourself however you want. Breasts, belly, thighs, vulva, but not to achieve something. Touch to discover textures, sensitivities, to map your own body. If there's pleasure, great. If not, also great. There's no objective. The first time Rachel tried it was extremely uncomfortable. She was accustomed to touching herself with a clear purpose: stimulate herself to orgasm as efficiently as possible. The idea of touching without going anywhere seemed strange, even wrong. But she took a deep breath and began. First, hands on her breasts. Not squeezing or stimulating intensely, just feeling. The weight, the texture, the temperature. She realized she'd never really paid attention to how her own breasts felt under her fingers. She moved her hands down her belly, an area she normally avoided out of insecurity. But now, just feeling without judgment, she noticed the softness of the skin, the way it responded to touch. Her thighs, so sensitive. She'd never noticed how much. And then, almost hesitantly, she touched her vulva. But instead of the direct, stimulating touch she normally used, she just explored gently. The contours, the folds, the variations in texture. Something extraordinary happened. Without the pressure to achieve an orgasm, her body began responding differently. Gentle waves of pleasure, not urgent or demanding, but like a warm current flowing through her. It wasn't intense like the path to orgasm usually was. It was more subtle, more diffuse, more complete. She continued for 20 minutes, just exploring, feeling, without agenda. And when she stopped, there was no frustration from not finishing. There was only a sense of fullness, of connection with her own body that she hadn't felt in years. Something changed, Rachel told Beto in the next session, still processing the experience. Beto smiled. What did you discover? That when I stop chasing orgasm, I feel so much more pleasure, she said, amazed at her own revelation. It's like the pressure to get there was blocking the ability to actually feel. Exactly, Beto agreed. We live in a culture obsessed with orgasms, as if they're the only measure of successful sexuality. But orgasms are just one facet of pleasure. And often, the more we chase them, the more they elude us. He paused. You're relearning something fundamental, that your body exists to be felt, not to perform. In the following weeks, Rachel continued the practice, and she began noticing profound changes, not just in her sexuality, but throughout her entire life. She became more aware of sensations during the day, the taste of food, the feeling of sun on her skin, the pleasure of a hug. It was as if she'd been living in black and white, and suddenly everything had color. Her relationship with her own body also changed radically. She no longer saw it as an object to be judged or a machine to be optimized. It was an instrument of experience, a portal to pleasure. In the 8th session, Beto introduced free movement practices, letting the body move intuitively, without choreography, just following internal impulses. Rachel felt ridiculous at first, but gradually surrendered. And she realized something surprising. Her body knew how to move. When she stopped controlling and simply allowed, there was a natural wisdom in the movement. This is sexual energy flowing, Beto explained. When we unblock our relationship with our bodies, this energy doesn't stay confined to the genitals. It permeates our entire being. It was in the 10th session that Beto mentioned alchemia intima, inner alchemy. You've done profound work reconnecting with your own body, he said, and that's the foundation. But there's a more advanced practice that can take this awakening to another level, if you feel it's appropriate, he explained. Alchemia intima was a tantric practice where conscious sexual union was used not as a goal in itself, but as a vehicle for consciousness expansion and complete energetic alignment. It's based on the same principles you're already practicing, Beto said. Total presence, no goal of orgasm, focus on sensation and energy flow. But instead of alone, you'd be guided through the experience with my facilitation. Rachel felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness, but she also recognized that something in her was ready. She had fundamentally changed her relationship with pleasure, with her body, with her sexuality. Maybe she was ready to integrate all of this more deeply. Yes, she said, I want to explore this. The Alchemia Intima session was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon when the office would be completely quiet. Rachel arrived as the sun began to lower, painting the Austin sky in shades of gold and rose. The space had been carefully prepared. Soft candles created sacred lighting. Palo Santo incense perfumed the air. Ambient music played quietly, nature sounds and harmonic frequencies. Beto received her with the same serenity as always. They began with tea and extended conversation, ensuring Rachel felt safe and comfortable. He explained each stage, reinforcing that she had complete control and could pause at any moment. Remember the fundamental principle, Beto said. We're not chasing anything. There's no goal of orgasm. We're simply present with what's happening, moment to moment. They began with 40 minutes of synchronized breathing. Sitting face to face, breathing together, Rachel felt her state of consciousness shift. Her body relaxed deeply while her awareness sharpened. Beto then guided her through exploratory touch, shoulders, arms, back, always with the same quality of goalless presence she'd practiced alone. Each touch was a discovery, not a technique. As the practice deepened, they moved through tantric postures, always maintaining focus on present sensation rather than any future goal. When they finally reached the sexual union that characterizes Alchemia Intima, Rachel experienced something that would forever transform her understanding of sexuality. There was no rush, no goal, just total presence with each sensation, each wave of pleasure, each movement of energy. And without the pressure to reach orgasm, her body opened in ways she'd never experienced. Waves of pleasure flowed through her, not building to a single climax, but expanding continuously. It was as if her entire body had become erogenous, every cell vibrating with diffuse, profound pleasure. And then came the revelation. Years of touching her own body with a goal, reach orgasm, finish, complete the task, had drastically limited her capacity for pleasure. It was like having access to only one room of an entire mansion. But when she began touching herself without a goal, simply exploring and feeling, the entire palace of pleasure opened to her. It wasn't about better or more intense orgasms. It was about a completely different capacity to experience pleasure. More diffuse, more complete, more integrated with her entire being. The energy continued flowing, building and circulating through her in waves that seemed endless. Rachel was crying, laughing, seized by ecstatic gratitude. This wasn't just sexual pleasure. It was a complete reconnection with her capacity to feel, to be alive, to be present. Afterward, wrapped in a soft blanket, Rachel remained silent for long minutes, integrating the experience. "I spent years doing it all wrong," she finally whispered. "Not wrong," Beto gently corrected. "Just in a limited way. You did what you were taught, that pleasure has to have a goal, that sex has to lead to orgasm, that there always needs to be an endpoint. Now you've discovered a different way." They talked for hours as the sky darkened over Austin. Beto explained how Western culture had transformed sexuality into performance, pleasure into achievement, orgasm into the sole objective. "But when we reconnect with our sensory nature," he said, "we discover that pleasure is infinitely vaster than we were taught. It's not about destinations. It's about being present in the journey." In the months that followed, Rachel's life transformed in ways she couldn't have predicted. Her practice of exploratory self-touch became a daily meditation, not necessarily sexual, but always sensory, always present. She discovered pleasure in touching all kinds of surfaces, in feeling the wind, in fully experiencing the act of eating. When she began dating again, she brought this new awareness to shared intimacy. Sex became exploratory, playful, without pressure. And ironically, by stopping the chase for orgasms, they began happening naturally, and were deeper and more satisfying than ever. But the changes went far beyond sexuality. Rachel became more present in all aspects of life. Her business decisions gained an intuitive depth. Her relationships deepened. She laughed more, cried more, felt more. She was no longer living in her head, constantly chasing goals. She was inhabiting her body, fully experiencing life. 6 months after Alchimia Intima, Rachel sent a message to sexologist Beto. "Thank you for teaching me that the goal of touch isn't to get anywhere. It's to be present with what is." The response came quickly. "You reawakened your own body wisdom. I just illuminated the path." Rachel smiled, putting away her phone and returning to the present moment, the feeling of the breeze through the window, the distant sound of music from 6th Street, the soft texture of the couch under her fingers. She closed her eyes and simply felt, without a goal, without an agenda, just alive.